So we now know that the next Prime Minister will not be a woman. And after the first round of voting, the battle is now on to be the candidate who joins Boris Johnson in the final vote of the Tory membership. That is because, with support from well over a third of Conservative MPs, Boris Johnson already has enough votes to give him a place in the last two. His next closest rival, Jeremy Hunt, was almost 70 votes behind him, closely followed by Michael Gove. Four others, Dominic Raab, Sajid Javid, Matt Hancock and Rory Stewart, also made it through to the second round next week. Andrea Leadsom, Mark Harper and Esther McVey all failed to get enough votes to continue. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Westminster. Gary?
Well, John, as you say, Boris Johnson couldn't really have hoped for much more in the first round of voting. He is on the ticket, unless his vote goes backwards, for the final two that go out to Conservative activists. Quite a long way behind Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary, and behind him, nipping at his ankles, Michael Gove. And I think you sense in Jeremy Hunt's supporters a little bit of disappointment that he didn't pull away from the crowd behind him more. And you sense that also in the fact that it seems to be a bit of a rethink going on in the Jeremy Hunt team about whether their man is going to take part in the TV hustings on Channel 4 on Sunday night. It looks as though that change of heart could be happening there. They're not going to remain aloof from that. They may well turn up, in which case there'll only be one empty podium, the one that Boris Johnson should be at, unless he changes his mind. Michael Gove seems to have managed to get through the ordeal of the cocaine story, cocaine use in his 30s that came out in a Sunday paper, and managed to hold on to some support, maybe grow it even a bit, and he does look like a bit of a threat to Jeremy Hunt right now. The two people who led the Vote Leave campaign, who fell out in 2016 when Michael Gove withdrew support for Boris Johnson, potentially the two names on the ticket, a grudge match to beat all grudge matches, perhaps. The candidate who scraped on at the bottom, Rory Stewart, is the one making the most noise. He turned round and had a pot shot at Boris Johnson and said if Boris Johnson were to suspend Parliament to try and get no-deal Brexit through, he and others would partake in setting up Parliament somewhere else, in another building, and bringing Boris Johnson down. Here's how Westminster reacted to the news of the first ballot of Conservative MPs.
Have you ever taken cocaine, Mr Johnson?
A chicken greeted Boris Johnson on his doorstep this morning, but ducking debates and scrutiny didn't stop well over 100 Tory MPs, putting him a convincing first place. In a distant second place, the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, others a bit closer on his heels than he would like.
I voted for Jeremy Hunt, just the same in the first round, but I hope he'll do very well, and we've got to get him into the final two, and I hope that's what will happen when there are the inevitable transfers over the weekend.
Is he the candidate to beat Boris, you think?
He is the candidate to win. The person who might beat Boris is Boris himself.
Michael Gove was only 6 votes behind Jeremy Hunt, and he's hoping he can now push aside stories about past cocaine use and push past the Foreign Secretary.
I'm delighted to be through to the next round of the Tory leadership contest, along with a range of other very good candidates.
Well, I think it's a good result for Michael Gove. I've come out publicly to say I would support him. He's had quite a tough week, and I think what it demonstrates is that under quite a lot of scrutiny, under quite a lot of personal attack in some ways, I think he survived extremely well.
All the surviving candidates will now chase supporters of defeated candidates like Esther McVey and Andrea Leadsom, selfied with survivor Rory Stewart as they voted today. Boris Johnson perhaps hoping his Brexit credentials win the bulk of those fellow Leave voters' supporters.
He's certainly popular with a lot of people. In the local polling that I've done of constituents, he's been winning those polls. But I need to dig through some of the policy areas, and I'll make a decision over the weekend.
As part of Team Leadsom, a lot of people will be assuming you now fold into maybe Team Johnson?
Well, I think everyone will have to wait a little time, because when you're a candidate or running a campaign, I want a weekend off, to be quite honest, and I'm pretty sure Andrea does too. So after my constituency day tomorrow, I should be turning my phone off. The first time I've done it for a long time, and it won't be being turned back on until Monday.
Tory MPs banged their desks, welcoming those who were about to announce the result. Those who came below third place today will have to work out whether they can grow support or should fold their tent.
take our time. Once the adrenaline of the first froth and frenzy of this contest ebbs a little bit, and have a proper contest on the substance, on the vision, and the TV debates are a great way of doing that.
There is going to be an enormous, understandable appetite for people to set out their stalls in the TV debate and over the coming days. Frankly, I wouldn't anticipate anything to happen much before next Tuesday. I think next Tuesday will be shakedown day after the second ballot, and then I think people will start talking turkey.
Mr Johnson's team is boasting of the breadth of support he has, some long sceptical of the former Foreign Secretary backing him today. So what were the doubts that he had to square with you to get you on side? You only declared for him this morning.
Well, to be brutally honest, it was I think that we should have all have voted for the Prime Minister's deal to get us out of the European Union, imperfect though it may be. I still believe that it's the best and only way we can actually get ourselves out of the European Union.
The suggestion is that Boris Johnson sits in a room with some supporters, those who are very staunchly pro-Brexit, and with a gleam in his eye happily entertains the idea of suspending Parliament to get a no-deal Brexit through, and then says something different to people from the other wing of the party.
Look, I have the advantage or disadvantage, however you like to see it, of sitting in a lot of the meetings that Boris has with colleagues.
And I can confirm that?
And I can tell you that he is saying the same thing consistently to every single colleague.
Rory Stewart, casting himself as Boris Johnson's nemesis, made it just into the second round. His supporters, and some others too, now framing this contest in stark terms. Is this a battle for the soul of the party?
To some extent it may well be. To some extent it may well be.
So what happens if you lose it?
Well, we're not in it to lose.
So what happens to you and supporters of Rory Stewart, people who think like him, if you lose a battle for the soul of the party?
We're not in it to lose.
I am, as I said to somebody on the doorstep the other day, an outstandingly moderate person.
So you think this is a battle for the soul of the Conservative Party, moderates versus zealots?
I think it's more than just about that, but we've got Brexit.
But there's a bit of
there.
that.
But there is a bit of that, yeah, without
So what happens if you lose it?
I want to win it.
Thank you very much indeed.
6 candidates now vie for the mantle to take on Boris Johnson. None confident they can actually take him down.
Gary Gibbon. Well, I was down at the Commons myself, and earlier I spoke to the former International Development Secretary, Priti Patel, who is backing Boris Johnson. I began by asking her if Boris Johnson's reluctance to be interviewed increased his chances of success.
This election so far, this contest, has been about members of Parliament, not about just going on the media. And to be fair to Boris, he launched his campaign yesterday, and now that he's launched, obviously he'll be out a lot more in terms of interviews and things of that nature. But I should emphasise, this is about the MPs. This is the MPs round of voting, and this is the only first round of voting because we'll go into other rounds next Tuesday.
But it's only the phase that is about MPs. The fact of the matter is it's finally about members. And if they see and hear their man on the telly or whatever it is, they have a way of making up their minds. And you've deprived them of that, and therefore he's done frightfully well.
Well, I disagree with that. I speak as someone that is a grassroots activist first and foremost. I know how hard Boris works across the country, campaigning in associations with his own parliamentary colleagues as well. And I can say, John, with a degree of conviction here as well, because I see it in my own constituency and with my own membership as well. There is a huge amount of support, a significant amount of support for Boris at the grassroots. And of course, once the MPs voting has taken place, then of course it will be a competition in the country through hustings, meeting the members. And to be frank about Boris,
so
he has spent many times
doing
this.
Then?
I think we will. We'll be out in the country, and it's something that I look forward to. And I know for a fact that our membership is desperate to have a vote and have a say in this contest because, of course, last time round they did not get a vote and they did not have their voices heard.
Well, the truth is that there were plenty of MPs at that news conference yesterday, and they too were deprived of any opportunity to hear him closely questioned. I mean, there were 6 questions and he didn't answer any of them.
Well, I felt he did. I felt Boris answered the questions, and I thought his speech yesterday at his launch was incredibly strong about, yes, his track record as Mayor for London, but also, John, his vision.
I noticed he left out the Foreign Secretary bit.
Well, I've worked with him in government.
You would have done the same, wouldn't you?
Well, no, because I've worked with him in government, and I will actually speak up for his record in government as well when he was Foreign Secretary. I've been in plenty of bilaterals with Boris, with presidents and prime ministers around the world, and also at international summits, and I think it's wrong that people just choose to really assassinate his character. And I think when people do that and make it personal, I think they have no arguments themselves.
Well, you could argue he's a self-assassin.
I don't, John, at all. I think Boris, in fairness to him yesterday at his launch, he spoke about his vision, his optimism, his hope for our country, how he would work to lift our standing in the world. And
but
John,
never about his being Foreign Secretary, and that is about our standing in the world. You'd have thought he would have said, look, I know the world, I've been out there.
He did speak yesterday, John, about our bilateral relationships, how we'd have to work harder at that.
He didn't boast about his role, which he did as Mayor for London, which is a long time ago.
I don't think he has to at all. I think it's important the way in which he put his track record in London. And let's not forget, being in government is exactly the same. It's about delivering, serving your country 100%, yes, but also delivering in terms of knife crime, getting knives off the streets, but actually tackling the big issues and the big injustices that the British public feel strongly about and see.
Looking at the field, who do you want to go through with him? Who do you want him to beat?
Well, this isn't about my choice. I'm backing Boris, and I stand firmly shoulder to shoulder alongside Boris. And I think it's now important that we put choice to our members. So this isn't about my preference or my choice. This will be for the members to decide. And as someone that's a big Democrat, and I speak constantly about how we should be reforming our party and giving our grassroots more say in terms of picking their leader, picking their parliamentary candidates, I think it's right that they are the final people that decide who is going to be the leader of the Conservative Party.
Priti Patel, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, Work and Pension Secretary Andrea Leadsom is backing Jeremy Hunt. I spoke to her in the Commons and started by asking her if she could work in a Boris Johnson cabinet.
I'm not interested in having those conversations because we're in the middle of a leadership race, and I always think it's a bit presumptuous to start thinking about not only who's going to win when we haven't finished asking the members who they want as leader, but also who they'd invite to the cabinet. I'm focused on talking about Jeremy Hunt, if we may.
But is Boris beatable?
Oh, Boris is beatable, yes. I mean, it seems absolutely likely that he's going to go through to the last two, just looking at the numbers today, barring some mishap, because of course actually has to take place for the final round. But when it goes out to members, there's going to be 16 hustings all over the country. Members are going to have the opportunity to really see and question the candidates. And you start again then. It doesn't matter how many MPs each candidate got. It only matters whether they win with the members.
But it therefore does matter that Jeremy Hunt comes second.
It matters enormously to me that Jeremy Hunt came second, and he did come second today, and I hope that he'll be able to build on the support he got from MPs over the next week to finish second, which is the important thing.
I don't want to put it in a crude way, but do you have to buy off some of the other people running?
Well, that
offer
is
them good
crude.
jobs?
No,
I know it's crude, but it might be political.
No, I can say for utter certainty that Jeremy is not doing that at all. I mean, he's making the case for being the right negotiator, the right person to unite the country, and I believe that that is a good case, and he can build support on that basis.
What do you make of Rory Stewart's run?
Rory has been a huge pleasure to work with in Cabinet, and I think he's making a good run, and it's been interesting to watch him. I do hope that when he thinks about whether he's going to go forward over the next round or two, he will think about backing Jeremy Hunt, who's the real prospect for getting into the final round and is much more aligned with his views than Boris's.
Isn't this actually the moment when people who realise they're not actually going to win should pull out and give him a clean run?
Well, I hope they will. I hope they will think about backing Jeremy so that he gets all the support we need to make sure that he does get into the finals in the last two.
Now, is Jeremy Hunt absolutely sworn against proroguing Parliament under any circumstances?
Yeah, he's ruled out proroguing Parliament, and what he has said is that he's completely committed to making sure that we get a deal. And the reason I'm backing him, and I made sure that I spoke to all the candidates individually, is that I think he has the best shot of doing that. Now, I know the EU have said they don't want to reopen the withdrawal agreement, but Jeremy has had conversations which indicate that even though they won't open that, they acknowledge that they have a responsibility in working with us to see if they can help break the impasse. I think he has the right style and the relationship and potentially the contacts to give us that opportunity to get some change and then to break the impasse here in the House of Commons. Because the impasse is in two places, Members of Parliament and with the EU.
Andrea Leadsom, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, with Boris's thumping victory in the first round of the Tory leadership contest and last night's attempt to block A no-deal Brexit failing in the Commons, the prospect of leaving Europe without an agreement is looming large for businesses. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, is with me. Siobhan.
Well, John, no deal is definitely back in the air. I've today been talking to the UK boss of DFDS, the ferry company. You may remember where they won one of those controversial no-deal ferry contracts. Well, he's told me today that there's an urgency to dust off those no-deal plans and for government to give clarity on the way ahead. And he gave me this interesting insight that in the run-up to the March 31st deadline, such was the rush to get products in and out of the country that his port in Immingham in Lincolnshire almost ground to a halt, and he had to manage it, John, on a one-in, one-out basis. He doesn't want that to happen again. Here's what he told me today.
The message is the services we supply keep the lights on in the country, they keep the food on the shelves. We need to keep it moving. We had a very tight experience in March with the volumes that we had and the unpreparedness of the whole supply chain. To go into October blindly doing the same thing again would be crazy. So we need to be better arranged and we need to be sorted out far quicker.
Well, John, he was here for a meeting of fellow port bosses in London today. Also at that meeting was a government official who said to them, OK, we'll talk about no-deal preparations sometime in July. Well, they told him in no uncertain terms that is not good enough. I also spoke to one of Britain's biggest food distributors today, Bidfood, who said that they were wary of the government's apathy in the increased risk of no deal. I also spoke to the boss of one of our drugs makers who was also concerned. He had this to say. What advice are you getting? Do you get the sense that the government is on it this time?
I don't think they are. It seems that we've just had this gap. Everything stopped from mid-April, and yet the clock is ticking, and nothing seems to have happened over the last 3 months. We don't seem to be learning the lessons from that period to carry forward for October.
Well, what's worrying, John, of course, that these are all big firms who are starting to express concern. Tomorrow, the Institute of Directors will issue this somewhat alarming statistic that more than half their members have not begun contingency planning for no-deal Brexit at all.